Welcome to episode 29 of the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Tirapelli, bariatric sports dietitian. Today, I want to chat about the pyramid or hierarchy of nutrition habits that can help you to optimize your nutrition to meet your exercise goals. So I want to get started today I want you to imagine a pyramid. Okay. And what we're going to do with that pyramid is we're going to divide that into several layers. And we're going to start at the base of that pyramid today and talk about each layer and how that is going to help you to reach your fitness goals after bariatric surgery. The reason that I wanted to cover this today was oftentimes when I'm working with my one-on-one clients, I realize that as we get focused on these kind of higher level nutrition goals, we more often than not have to go back to the bariatric nutrition basics and make sure that we have those habits and nutritional patterns in place first. Because a lot of times, we get off track or maybe we get out of a habit that we had established right away after the surgery and that's kind of slipped away. But I want to talk today about the importance of those habits and basically how we need to start from the bottom and work our way up so that you can reach your fitness goals through optimizing your nutrition. So let's get started with that bottom base of our pyramid. So the bottom base of a pyramid for someone that is wanting to optimize their nutrition for their, exercise or training goals is we need to make sure we're getting in those daily bariatric nutrition basics and behaviors. Because remember after surgery, or let me say this, before you had surgery, do you remember when you met with your, surgical center team? Maybe you met with the dietitian, the surgeon, maybe even a bariatric psychologist might have been on the team. And I bet you went through some very basic nutrition habits as well as daily habits that you can establish that would help you for the long term, right? Because those are the habits that are going to be your foundation that you'll build upon. And so I want to talk about those because remember, guys, if you are wanting to increase exercise, there is going to be higher and higher demands on your nutrition. And your nutrition is going to play such a more important role as you move forward. And if we don't have these basic habits and nutrition principles in place, it makes it a lot more difficult to then layer on these other, needs and requirements. So again, I want to talk about these because I really want to make sure as you're moving forward and thinking about new goals that you want to achieve, which is awesome, I want to make sure that you are thinking about, hey, do I have these things in place first before I, take on some new goals? So let's talk about those. So first thing that you probably remember when you were, starting off on your journey with deciding to have bariatric surgery with your nutrition was, hey, I need to be eating more on a consistent schedule. Again, if you are wanting to exercise down the road, one of the first things that I look at is your eating pattern. What is your schedule of eating? How often are you eating? How much are you eating? What are you eating? And eating 3 meals a day and eating on a consistent schedule, meaning, every 3 to 4 hours if possible, depending upon, again, your personal schedule, is going to be really important for many reasons. Number one, it helps us then to meet our overall calorie or macronutrient goals like protein and carbohydrates and fats. It helps to sustain your blood sugar so that you're not having these big ups and drops. It also helps you to make you feel more full, right? Because if we're eating on a consistent schedule, we're eating every 3 to 4 hours, we're incorporating our protein and our carbohydrates, we're eating balanced plates. And then we're going to eat again in 3 to 4 hours, our body knows that nutrition is coming. And I don't know about you, but maybe in the past, your eating habits have kind of gone off the rails, right? Where some days your first meal is not till, 1 or 2 p.m. Some days it's at 7 a.m. and you just really don't have a pattern in place. So I want to encourage you. Setting a consistent eating pattern is going to be critical because when down the road, you want to start now, I'm going to exercise, early in the morning, or I'm going to exercise at night. How am I going to adjust my nutrition? If your nutrition's all over the place in terms of your timing of meals, we really need to get that fixed first. Okay. So making sure that you are eating on a consistent schedule. And again, we're eating a balanced plate where we're focusing on, guess what number 2 priority is? Getting our protein goals in, right? So we need to make sure we are meeting our bare minimum protein goals. Now, I know all of you that have had surgery, most surgical centers typically recommend 60 to 80 grams per day of protein. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But that 60-gram protein dose has been suggested in research to be the minimum amount that an adult needs to prevent muscle wasting, okay? And especially when you're on a low caloric intake because you've had bariatric surgery, that minimum of 60 grams grams of protein a day is really critical for maintaining lean tissue, for helping you to have enough protein to basically do your bodily functions, hormone function, antibody function, fight off infection. So we have to get in that base of protein, okay? So that minimum of the 60 grams, 80, up to 80, 90, whatever it might be from your surgical center. And of course, I'm sure you were always taught, eat your protein food first at every single meal. That's priority. We don't want to fill up on other things before we get our protein needs met, because again, when we're eating such a small amount of calories and nutrition overall, we want to prioritize that protein. And again, to tie this into my bariatric athletes, as you increase exercise, or for example, you have muscle gaining goals, your protein needs are going to increase. Okay. And as we move farther out from when you had your surgery, that is something that, again, if I'm working with you one-on-one, we're going to look at your protein and see how we can optimize that further down the road when you're able to tolerate more, to meet whatever that fitness and training goal is. Because remember, protein's so important for muscle growth, but also for repair and recovery. And so again, if we have specific training goals, protein is going to be something that we will need to increase over time. So again, I'll go back to, if we can't even get our minimum needs met, it's going to be a lot more difficult to say, oh, you're only at 60 grams now, and our goal ultimately is going to be, I'm just throwing a number out, 100, 120, 150, whatever it is. We got to get that base nutrition in. How do I meet my base protein goals? Okay. Sipping on at least 64 ounces a day of fluids. Now, I know that you were probably taught that as well when you came into your bariatric surgical center. Hey, fluids are going to be really important. And darn, it is challenging, right? For those of you that may be years down the road from when you had your surgery, it still might be a challenge to get your fluids in, right? I hear that all the time. And so this one is really important, especially for active individuals after surgery, because again, not only are you already struggling with the fact that it's hard to get it in because we have to separate our food and drink, and that adds that timing piece in, or maybe water doesn't taste as good to you, or it doesn't feel good to you in your stomach. But then add on, now I'm exercising and I'm sweating, so I'm losing fluid from my body, and that can really increase your risk of dehydration. And as you can imagine, if you are trying to train for something or just work out hard, when we are dehydrated, we cannot train as high intense level, because when we are dehydrated, we will fatigue sooner. Okay. Because remember, fluids and being hydrated help our body to cool itself. And so if we're dehydrated, that can really impact how how we can exercise. So that 64 ounces of fluids per day is going to be a bare minimum. Okay. And that is something I really want to encourage in this first 6 to 12 months post-op, if that's where you are in your journey. Really, really make fluids a priority, because again, down the road, as we increase exercise, sweating, etc., your fluids are going to go up, right? Your fluid needs will increase due to that, those losses. So really focusing on that now is important. Separating your food and drink by 30 minutes. I know this is another behavior that you're like, yeah, Kim, who cares? What's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal because again, if we are always kind of eating and drinking together, maybe we aren't able to eat as much. And down the road, when our nutrition goals increase to meet our training goals, if you're eating and drinking together, you're displacing that space in that new small pouch with fluid where we need to get in our protein or our added carbohydrates, whatever it might be. So separating food and drink is important, because that does allow you to then, when it is time to eat, sit down and get in the nutrition that your small stomach can hold, right? The volume is going to be less, but we want to optimize that when we sit down to eat. In addition, it can push food through more rapidly if you do pour fluids in on top. That can cause your stomach to empty out more quickly. And for some, that can lead to them feeling hungry sooner, and then maybe lead to more of a grazing pattern. So separating food and drink by 30 minutes is an important, daily habit that really should be a part of your life, Chewing 30 times per bite. I bet you guys have heard this one. Maybe it was 20, 30, whatever it might be. Why is this one important for a part of our daily habits? Because when we chew our food well, lots of things happen. Number one, we're giving a chance for our stomach and our brain to have a conversation. Hey, there's food coming in. Hey, I'm getting full. Hey, stop, right? If we're just chewing twice and swallowing, we're going to be eating more rapidly before our stomach can even tell our brain, hey, I'm full. Right? So eating slower helps us to overall kind of maintain a pace that your stomach can give your brain, hey, stop, I'm full, right? And that prevents us from overeating. And it just helps us really to enjoy our food better. You can enjoy the flavors of your food better when you chew it well. And so it's an important habit that I know kind of gets glossed over, but certainly chewing your food well, taking your time at your meals, sitting at a table, putting your fork down in between bites and really just enjoying it. It really does help optimize the eating experience. And that's part of this too, right? I know you've had bariatric surgery, and of course, overall, your intake has been reduced because you have a new, smaller stomach or the absorption has changed due to your surgery. But guys, we want to still enjoy it, right? We want to enjoy the experience and really sitting down, being a mindful eater, chewing, really important habit that you'll need for lifelong. Okay. Weighing and measuring your food portions. So I bet when you first again came into your surgical center, they talked to you about getting measuring cups. I remember teaching my patients that at the surgical center that I worked at. And really just understanding how much am I able to eat? Because oftentimes, maybe in the past, you hadn't been measuring accurately and you weren't really paying attention. Sometimes it's mostly just about giving us an eye-opening experience to go, oh, this is what 1 cup of, rice looks like. This is what 4 ounces of chicken breast looks like. Okay. And becoming more familiar with portions by tracking it and measuring initially helps that practice, that experience is going to then carry you so that when you do go out with friends and family and go on vacations and trips, yeah, you're not going to be carrying around measuring cups, maybe. Maybe you are, but maybe you're not. And the more that you practice that, visually understanding this is what this amount is and how it feels, you will be able to better manage and make decisions as you move on from when you had your surgery down the road, so that you still day to day can make good decisions and choices on what you're eating and how much. So again, weighing, measuring your food portions, especially in that first year post-op, it's such a helpful habit because it will help you to understand what you're taking in at each meal. Tracking your intake via a food journal. Again, I know I've talked about this on a lot of my previous episodes, but I just want to highlight, remember guys, journaling isn't meant to be, something where it makes you feel guilty or, it's not meant to be good or bad. It's meant to just say, hey, this is a snapshot in time. This is a picture of what I'm doing right now, to have you basically have more understanding of your habits, your patterns, your behaviors. And so logging is more about, for me anyways, when I work with my clients, I don't tell them they have to do it every single day, for life or anything like that. It's mostly just about understanding what your current intake is, what are your trends, how are we going to ultimately optimize your intake to help you meet your goals. So establishing that habit now is good, because as we move forward and we realize, oh, maybe I do need more calories or protein or carbs to fuel my exercise. If you've been tracking and that's kind of a typical habit, we have that data to look at real rapidly and we can go, oh yeah, you're eating more of your calories later in the day and you're exercising in the morning, and we need to optimize your nutrition around that workout better. And so again, that journal just gives us that data, that feedback where we can look at it quickly and make adjustments as we go. Taking your daily bariatric multivitamins. Guys, I know. Am I like what do you want to say? I just say this every time. I know. And you're probably like, oh gosh, I've heard this every single time she talks about this on her episodes. But the daily bariatric multivitamins are so important. The micronutrients, because I know I spend a lot of time talking about carbs and protein and your fluids and what to eat and all these things pre and post workout. But again, I want to highlight, because we often forget about these vitamins and minerals, or at some point down the road, like, oh, I'm 6 years post-op, I don't need to take these anymore. Yep, sure do. Your body has been permanently changed for life. The amount of nutrition you can consume, as well as how much you can absorb, has been permanently changed. And so these vitamins and minerals play a critical role in just keeping your vitamins levels normal, but also for some of you that are now exercising on top of it. Remember, in previous episodes, I've talked about the importance that micronutrients play in energy production, chemical reactions that are happening that create energy so that you can continue to run or move your body, propel your body. So remember that vitamins and minerals every single day are critical. If you don't know what you're supposed to be taking, please get back into touch with your bariatric surgical center. If you have questions about it, you can always message me as well. But I always defer to your surgical center's guidelines, as well as if you haven't had labs drawn in the last year, they should be done every single year. Okay, if you've gotten out of touch with your surgical center, you can always message them, hey, what's my lab panel supposed to be? And you can have your primary care order it. So stay on top of that, because that's going to also play a role in how much you can exercise, how much force you can exert when you are now trying to achieve these goals down the road. And then, of course, another base, and this is the last one before we move on, as part of your base of your pyramid is, of course, beginning that consistent exercise routine. I know I'm talking all about nutrition, but of course, as we, start when you've had your surgery and now you're going to begin, working towards maybe some goals down the road, whether it be you want to gain muscle or you want to start training for an endurance event, we got to start somewhere, right? So establishing that, exercise plan where it might start with walking, whatever you can tolerate. Maybe you start incorporating resistance training as you get farther out from when you had your surgery and you're able to tolerate more nutrition to fuel that movement. But maybe you start working out 3 times a week. You're going to incorporate some light weights. We're going to do our walking. And we start slowly and we build up. But again, it's hard to go from doing nothing to, hey, now I want to train for a half marathon. That's not going to work, right? We got to start somewhere. So I always remind folks in this initial phases, especially in that first year, really find out what you enjoy, right? What's some activity that you can see yourself doing, not just for a short period of time, but something that you enjoy doing, that you move your body. Maybe it's part of your community, meet new friends, but something that you can do, because that's going to be an important part of your journey as well as that movement piece. So those are some of the nutrition habits, behaviors that I want to just, again, hammer home. Guys, if we don't have these behaviors and habits in place, it is going to be much more difficult for you to now layer in other strategies that will optimize your nutrition to help you meet your goals. So those behaviors that I just talked about, I would encourage you, listen again, take some notes. Are you doing these things? Okay, how can we get these back into your daily life, your habits? Because again, these are going to be critical as part of your foundation that we build upon. Okay, so let's move on to the second layer. So after we have, established our bariatric nutrition basics and habits, the second layer would now be looking at optimizing our macros, calories for your specific training goals. I also like to call this nutrition periodization. Nutrition periodization is just basically a concept that says we are optimizing our nutrition to meet the training cycle that we are in. So if maybe you are just exercising 3 times a week, well, then maybe our calories and our carbs and protein, needs aren't going to be as, high versus someone that's exercising 5 to 6 times a week or is increasing their mileage. They're training for a 10K or a half marathon. So based on what you're doing for your training is going to tell us where we need to be with our calories and macros. So the reason that this is the second layer is, again, if we don't have our basic nutrition, day-to-day basic needs met, we can't start optimizing nutrition, more specifically if we don't even have our base, needs being met, right? So typically what I say is once we get through that first 6 to 12 months post-op of just learning our new bodies, going through that rapid weight loss phase, finding out what is our new normal, kind of what's our weight, our maintenance weight that we're going to kind of start kind of hanging around. That's where we start looking at maybe optimizing nutrition, because typically around, anywhere between 6, 9, 12 months, people are starting to feel a little bit better. Their intake is increasing gradually. And now they're starting to maybe add in some additional movement. So this is where we can start optimizing calories, macronutrients like protein, carbohydrates, fats, etc. each day to meet your specific goals. But, oftentimes I'll have folks that'll come to me and maybe they're 1 month post-op. And, obviously, in those first 3 to 6 months, and I would even say even up to that first year, your intake is so low initially, and it's gradually increasing. It's hard to make a lot of significant changes because you just can't tolerate it. So just be patient. There is going to be a time and a place where we are absolutely going to be able to start, making some good changes so that you can, really maybe increase exercise further. So be patient with that. But like I've said in the beginning here, start from where you are. We can build upon that as long as we have our basic, our foundation established. So this is where working with like a bariatric sports dietitian, like myself, I can help you because we can start optimizing your nutrition to meet whatever specific fitness goals you have, right? So for some things that we might look at in this layer, for example, would be slowly increasing overall calories to fuel your workouts. Back in episode 26 of the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast, I talked about underfueling, excuse me. And if you're wondering like, am I eating enough to fuel my activity? Go check out episode 26, and I give you all those cues kind of so that you can identify, like, are you not taking in enough, calories, carbs, protein, fats? What is it? Why am I feeling this way? And I go through all that. So give that a listen. But typically when we're ready to start making some changes, the first thing I'll look at certainly is going to be your log. What are we currently doing? Where are we at now? And how can we maybe start slowly adjusting calories to help you to get through those workouts, right? If you're, halfway through workouts and you're just like, I cannot even do this, it probably tells us that it's time for you to maybe take a look at increasing calories. And it might just be as small as adding in 100 to 200 calories a day. I'm not talking about jumping up to 500 calories or anything like that. When I work with clients, we start with where we are and we start making incremental changes because I find that that's much more realistic, right? It's much more realistic to just, hey, we're going to start with adding in 100 to 200 calories rather than saying, oh, we're going to jump up 500, right? Because that might be difficult to do, especially when you've had bariatric surgery. So we start slow, we start adding in some calories. Typically, especially if you are increasing overall exercise, we might now start looking at layering more carbohydrates. Okay. Again, we don't abandon our bariatric nutrition basics of eating our protein food first. That's still going to be a nutrition basic for life. We still always focus on our protein food first. But now that you're exercising more, and I've talked about this previously in lots of my episodes, this is where carbohydrates are critical, right? Because carbohydrates are the main energy source for our muscles during exercise. So we want to make sure then that as we are increasing calories, we're starting now to add in carbohydrates to our meals to help balance out our plates. What foods have carbohydrates? We're looking at fruits, we're looking at vegetables, we're looking at whole grains, beans, dairy, lentils, legumes, things like that. So again, we're going our protein food first, and then we're starting to incorporate more carbohydrates. I typically start with folks by, okay, where are we at with your carbohydrates per meal? Let's maybe start incrementally increasing by 15 to 30 grams at each meal of carbohydrate. And also looking at optimizing that carbohydrate around or during workouts as well to be an energy source for your muscles. Another thing I will look at when we're optimizing your, macronutrients and calories is also going to be fluids. Now that you're exercising more, are you staying hydrated? Are you taking in enough to cover your basic fluid needs as well as what you're losing in your sweat? Because remember, if you were to check your weight pre and post workout, if you lose, let's just say you lost 1 pound in sweat, we need to rehydrate with 16 to 24 ounces of fluid. And that is in addition to your daily fluid goals. Okay. And the rule of thumb that I typically teach my clients is, a half ounce per pound is kind of your lower end of your fluid goals for the day. So if you are, let's just say 150 pounds, that would be 75 ounces per day minimum. Okay. And again, we're still separating food and drink. We're still sipping in between our meals. But I just want to highlight this because as we optimize nutrition, don't forget fluids. They are critical to keeping you basically able to exercise at high intensity levels. Okay. And then, of course, increasing our protein. Again, guys, if you have goals of muscle gaining or, you just are trying to gain strength in the gym or you're wanting to recover properly so that you're not sore for prolonged periods of time, again, we will look at carbohydrates for recovery, but protein is very important, right, for muscle gaining and recovery. So the typical range that I've talked about in my previous episodes, that 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of protein. Again, this is not your weight right after the surgery. This is, we want when you get to like your maintenance weight or your goal weight, or you can even use your lean muscle mass, and you would multiply that out by 0.7 to 1 gram. And that would give you how many grams a day of protein is really ideal for if you're trying to gain muscle. Okay. So again, if you're, 150 pounds, if we go all the way up to 1 gram per pound, that's 150 grams of protein, right? I don't typically tell folks to go right up to the 1 gram. I say, let's start at the 0.7 and we multiply that out by their weight or their lean body mass. We find out what's that minimum amount of protein that we want to start aiming for so that we know we're getting to that muscle building protein amount. Okay. So those are some of the things that I look at when I am optimizing, clients' calories, macronutrients to meet their specific training goals. Now we're going to move up to the third layer in our pyramid. So again, remember our pyramid where we started the basic nutrition basics is the base of the pyramid. We went up to optimizing macros and calories to meet your training goals. Now the third layer would be optimizing timing of meals and snacks, right? So now that we know, hey, what we're supposed to be eating, calories and carbs, protein, fats, the next layer up would be, okay, how do we strategize with timing of those? How many grams of protein at each meal should we be looking at? Carbohydrates. When should we have a pre-workout or a post-workout? Do we need them based on when we have our meals? Again, back in episode 11 of the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast, I talked about how to time your meals and snacks around your workouts. So if you're kind of like, hey, I'm a 6 a.m. workout person or I'm a 9 p.m. workout person, I even gave exact examples of time. I'm going to work out here, this is what I could eat pre or post workout. So again, remember pre-workout, we want to start looking at utilizing within an hour or two before a workout, incorporating 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate to help fuel our muscles and kind of top off our muscle glycogen stores. As well as if you get through that exercise session, we want to try, if we can, get something in within an hour or two post-workout, and we want it to incorporate protein and carbs. So again, at least 15 to 30 carbs. I'd love for you to do more. And then also 20 to about 40 grams of protein can help with that recovery process and get that going. Just think of it as the sooner I can get those nutrients back into my muscles, the better. Okay. So again, always remember that the number one goal in a day is getting our numbers met, meaning our calories, carb, protein, fats. But that next layer, that next strategy then above that is going to be that timing. That's where timing and what I'm talking about now, it does become important. And I want to highlight a few red flags that I get from folks, skipping meals, doing fasting workouts, skipping snacks, not having pre or post workout, meals, and they're going long periods around workouts without nutrition. Guys, that is not going to help optimize your workout. I'm going to be honest. And if you have specific training goals that you're trying to reach, eating on a haphazard schedule or really not prioritizing the timing of your food around your workouts, it can just slow your progress. And so it's not going to, it doesn't mean that you'll never meet your goals. It just, if you're really trying to optimize these strategies, this is a good one. Okay. So again, as I talked about earlier, we want to try to have meals about every 3 to 4 hours. We can certainly add in snacks for a pre or post workout, especially if your meal has, been quite a bit from when you're going to work out. That's where you want to throw in those snacks that incorporate both carbohydrate and protein. And that'll really help with optimizing that training session as well as that recovery. So, and then one last thing is I'll talk about timing of during exercise. So for my athletes out there that are, more endurance training athletes, if you are exercising longer than 60 minutes continuous, this is where replacing carbohydrate and electrolytes that you are using in the session as well as losing in sweat, that's where that's important. The rule of thumb for exercising 60 minutes in continuous or longer in terms of how much carbs we should be having, it's 30 to 60 grams per hour of exercise. And then, and you can certainly utilize whole foods. You can utilize sports nutrition products like gels or goos or chews, things like that. And the whole foods would be things like pretzels, crackers, dry fruit, dry cereal, if you don't tolerate those sports nutrition products. And you ideally want to try to get to at least 30 grams of carbohydrate in an hour of whatever you're doing. So if you're running, you're cycling, doing triathlon training, that kind of thing, that's where this is important. And then of course, replenishing with electrolytes and fluids. Typically, I recommend trying to get in 4 to 6 ounces about every 15 minutes of your training session. If it's an endurance event, that you're sipping so that we are replacing those losses that you're having from your sweat. And typically a lot of those gels and goos, I just want to say, some of them don't have very high content of electrolytes in them. They're mostly just carbohydrate focused. And so that is where you can look into products that you can mix in with your fluids that do contain electrolytes. Okay. So optimizing timing of meals and snacks during the day, as well as fueling properly during, longer training sessions, that is layer number 3. Okay. Now, last layer in our pyramid, and we'll be done here, is going to be that tippy top of the pyramid, right? And I bet you already know what I'm going to say because you probably have heard me say this before. But the tip top of the pyramid is going to be supplements, right? I'm not talking about your bariatric vitamins and minerals. Oh no, those were in the base. Those were part of the most important things you need to be doing every day. But supplements or ergogenic aids that help optimize your training or your recovery or your performance, we don't even get to that part unless we have done all of these other nutritional strategies first. Okay. And I know I've said this before, guys, but there is no silver bullet out there. There is no magical product that is going to solve our problems, right? Or have us go from, our starting point to what we want to be just by taking the supplement. No, unfortunately, there is no supplement that does that. Okay. Now, are there research supplements out there that can help optimize your performance and recovery and things like that? Yeah, you bet. And I'll chat about just a few here in a minute. But I just want to reiterate a few things. Number one, we never begin a new supplement without talking to your doctor first, because there are some supplements that wouldn't be recommended depending upon what medical conditions you have. Being more knowledgeable about how to read a label. Like if you're going to begin supplements, you should probably know like, well, how much am I supposed to be taking of this? Is this a good brand? Does it have the NSF certification on it? So that I know that it's third party tested for purity and potency. So meaning what it says on the label, I'm actually getting. Because as you guys know, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of products and brands out there that literally someone can just make and be like, all right, I'm bringing this to market, right? And there's very minimal regulation for supplements out there. So they can have nothing of what they say on the label, right? In fact, there's tons of companies out there that do the testing and will put out, reports and say, oh yeah, these products had none of what it says on the label. So again, the reason I'm just saying this to start is I want to make sure you hear me say that we don't even talk about supplements unless we have gotten your nutritional patterns and habits established first, okay? Because that is the true silver bullet. Your nutrition, your day-to-day habits and behaviors, and how you're fueling your muscles, okay? That's the silver bullet, right? That consistency in day-to-day intake, not supplements, okay? Now, can they play a role? They can. Again, supplements mean rounding out the intake, not replacing, right? So some of the supplements that I'm going to talk about right now, I've talked about previously, but some that have really had some good research behind them that have helped really optimize performance. As you've heard me talk about before, creatine monohydrate. I had Dr. Darren Kandow on several episodes ago, and we talked all about creatine. So if you're interested in learning more about it, please tune into that episode because we talked everything that you want to know possibly about creatine monohydrate, how it helps our body in terms of growing lean muscle mass with recovery, with different populations that are now utilizing creatine and how it impacts brain function, bone health, female, athletes, things like that. So check it out. But creatine monohydrate is a very well studied supplement that can be looked at in terms of if you have goals of lean muscle mass growth that you'd like to achieve or power, strength, as well as tart cherry juice. Tart cherry juice has been looked at as an anti-inflammatory. It helps optimize recovery, reduce muscle soreness. It also has been suggested to help support with sleeping. So that's another product that has been looked at in terms of a good ergogenic aid. Omega-3s, which are those essential fatty acids that our bodies do not make and we need to get from our diet. Omega-3s have been shown to help with reduction of inflammation, enhance recovery and muscle growth. So that's another supplement that is out there that has good research behind it. Beetroot juice, which is a dietary nitrate. Dietary nitrates get converted to nitric oxide in the body, and this has a vasodilatory effect on basically our blood so that we can increase oxygen and nutrient delivery to organs and muscles. So that's a good thing. And so beetroot juice is another supplement out there that has been shown to be positive for someone that's especially with endurance activity and things like that. And then caffeine. I know caffeine gets a bad rap because as a bariatric individual, caffeine has been, typically educated to be eliminated prior to surgery. If and when your doctor says it's appropriate for you to reintroduce it, caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant that can help prevent feelings of fatigue and workouts, basically giving you a boost. And so certainly, again, don't start it if you're not allowed to or not supposed to. But that can be an ergogenic aid that can be utilized if you take it about 60 minutes prior to exercise to allow it to peak in your blood as you begin your exercise. So those are just some supplements. And you know what, guys? I was thinking about this as I was writing this all down today. I'm going to do a separate episode on those particular new supplements that I just talked about because I want to get into a lot more discussion on the research and all the impacts that they have on our body. And so I will do a separate episode here coming up on these supplements that I just talked about today. So tune in. I will have more info on those coming up. So guys, in summary, our pyramid, again, when we think about, hey, I have all these exciting, cool goals I want to achieve down the road. If we kind of skip to the top and think that just going to the supplements is going to help us reach our goals, we're really missing the boat. So I want to encourage you, go back, look at our Bariatric Nutrition Basics, go back to your bariatric binder that you probably received in your surgical center. Are you doing those habits? Once we get those habits established, now we look at, okay, now I'm going to optimize my macronutrients, my calories to really help fuel my workouts better so I feel good in the workouts. From there, I'm going to now look at my timing of my meals and my snacks and what I'm eating at each meal and how much to optimize my plate, optimize my pre-workout or my post-workout nutrition. So timing becomes important. And then we look at other things like supplements and things like that to optimize our training. So I wanted to talk about this today because, again, I just wanted to make sure we have that base understanding. So as we move forward in our podcast and we bring in experts and we talk about different supplements or different, ways to optimize nutrition, I want you to always remember to go back to this. We have to have these, foundational habits established before we can layer on all these other cool strategies, right? To really get the most out of it. So with that is a summary of today, but I also wanted to just say, I found out today that my podcast now has 10,000 downloads. And I can honestly say, guys, when I started this podcast back in, October of 2022, I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea how I was going to, be coming up with content or getting guests on. I just was like, look, I think that this is a good medium to really talk about these topics, try to bring on more experts and just shed a light on the active bariatric community, right? Because each and every one of you that tune in, have your own stories and journeys and your own goals. And I know that there's not a ton of information out there for you, for an active bariatric individual. And as a dietitian and, working in the bariatric field for the last 16 years and hearing all the questions that I would get, I knew that, we got to get more info out there. So that is why I started this podcast. And it's just been so much fun having individual bariatric athletes come on and listening to your journeys and highlighting your successes because, gosh, it's motivating. It is inspiring. I think we learn from each other because every one of us is on our own journey. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank each and every single one of you for tuning in each week to these podcasts. I hope that you're finding them helpful. If you don't mind sharing them, I would so appreciate that because the more that we can kind of grow and get more guests on and just touch more folks and hope to help each other, that's really my goal. So again, thank you so much for tuning in thus far. We're going to keep this ball rolling, keep doing our podcasts each week or as close as I can. I'm going to be taking some weeks off here in the summer to spend some time with my family, but trying to keep to that once a week schedule is definitely my goal. So as a reminder, you can watch the full episode of this podcast episode on my YouTube channel, the Active Bariatric Nutrition channel. So please make sure you subscribe, give it a like. Also, if you wouldn't mind, please share this podcast with someone who you think might find it helpful and subscribe to it. And please give it a rating and a review. My understanding from all these podcast things work is the more ratings and reviews you get, the more it then promotes it and puts it up in front of people so that they might click on it and say, hey, I'm going to give this a shot, give it a listen. So if you don't mind doing that, I'd so appreciate it. You can follow me on my social media, on my Instagram, which is at Active Bariatric, as well as on my Facebook and TikTok pages, the Active Bariatric Nutrition channels. If you'd like to learn more about my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services, please go to my website, activebariatricnutrition.com. You can schedule a free discovery call where we can learn more about each other. So again, thank you once more for tuning in this week. And guess what? We'll do this again next week. Take care, everybody.